look at Part 1.
Part 1.
You are going to hear a conversation about purchasing a cellular phone. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now listen to the tape and answer questions 1 to 6.
Excuse me, can you give me some information about purchasing a cellular phone?
Of course, my pleasure. We carry all sorts of phones, from the most basic phones to very sophisticated web-enabled phones. I will do my best to help you find a phone that suits your needs.
Thanks. I'm looking for 2 cellular phones, one for me and one for my son. I think I won't need anything too sophisticated, just your basic phone functions. But maybe my son will like something with more functions.
Sure, well, let's take a look. So you have no preferences at all? What about the size or colour? How about the brand?
Well, I don't really care what brand the cell phone is, but I guess I don't want anything that's too big or too small. I want a phone that can fit nicely in my hand and in my pocket. If it's too big, it might be too heavy, and if it's too small, I might lose it. Colour, I don't really care about either. Well, I don't want a pink phone.
Ah, okay, so let's look for something suitable for a working person. How about this one? This one is the R55. It is black, not too big, not too small, all the usual functions. The best feature of the R55 is that it can be used worldwide, even in Europe or Asia.
It looks good. How much does it cost?
It is only $100. If you sign up for a calling plan, then we will give you a $50 discount on the phone.
How old is this model, though? I don't want anything that's too old.
This model was introduced into the market about 3 years ago, so it is a bit older, but be assured it will still work fine.
Well, I think I still want something not as old. How about from last year? Any good phones from around that time?
Yes, there are some. How about this one? It's the new model of the phone you just looked at, called the W55. Most of the features are the same. There are some new features on the W55 though. The battery will last up to 2 days longer, and the overall weight of the phone is lighter.
How much is this one?
This is selling for $150. If you purchase it along with a phone plan, then it will be only $100.
Okay, I think I'll take this one. Now, I need to pick up a phone for my son. I think he'll want something more trendy, so how about a new model for him? Nothing too extravagant or expensive, though.
This right here is the newest offering from the leading company in the cellular phone business. The phone is called the Rocket. It is well suited for teenage users. Among the teen-friendly features are 10 songs to choose from, a free messaging system that allows friends to send text to each other, and voice recognition dialing. The thing most younger users like about the Rocket is that it has a screen that changes colours. All this for only $100 with a purchase of a 1-year phone plan.
Sounds like something my son will like. Can I sign us both up at once?
Yes, of course. Both of you can share one plan. You will pay only $50 a month for both of you to share a plan.
That's it? Only $50 a month?
Yes, that's all.
Now look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen to the tape and answer questions 7 to 10.
Okay, I will need your information. Name and address, please.
Richard Derek Jones.
What's your profession?
I'm an engineer.
Address, please.
322 First Street, San Francisco, California.
And phone number, please.
621-360-7601. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong number. 621-360-7610.
How many phones do you want activated onto your plan?
2 for now.
Thank you very much. Your phones will be ready in a minute.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2. Part 2.
You will hear a presenter on a radio phone-in show. The presenter is talking to a woman who was bitten by a poisonous spider.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Today we're continuing our Traveller's Tales. On the line we have Amanda Toddington, who had quite a nasty experience in Australia last year. Isn't that right, Amanda?
Yes. My husband and I were on holiday and we were staying at a friend's house on the coast near Brisbane. It was towards the end of the holiday and I was about to go into the garden and enjoy my breakfast. I walked out into the kitchen, slid my left foot into my shoe and felt a tiny sting. It was pretty painless, but I shook the shoe off my foot and saw this tiny spider running out as the shoe hit the wall. Anyway, not being an expert, I presumed the worst, that I'd been bitten by something that was going to kill me, and I completely lost control. I don't think I've ever screamed so much in all my life. We'd been told beforehand to always check our shoes before putting them on, as it's a common way to get bitten. So I suppose it was my own fault, really.
So what was it that had bitten you?
Tony, that's our Australian friend, he immediately asked me if I knew what had bitten me, and I pointed to the corner of the room where I'd last seen the spider. He picked up a jar and found the creature in the corner where the shoe had hit the floor. "It's a redback," he said, and he gently placed the jar over the spider. The funny thing was, we'd been talking about some of the creatures we needed to be careful of a few days previously, and as he said the name redback, the conversation came flooding back to me. In particular, the fact that the bite can be extremely painful. I've found out since that the redback is from the same family as the black widow spider, and it's the female that does the damage, which it turned out was what I'd been bitten by.
You must have been absolutely petrified.
You can say that again. I remember feeling quite confused. I wasn't in a great deal of pain to begin with, and yet I could see from our friends' faces that they were concerned. Tony explained that the venom or poison of the bite spreads quite slowly, so the pain doesn't feel too bad at first. Gwen, Tony's wife, brought an ice pack, and Tony held it against the bite to make it less painful. Apparently, you're not supposed to put a bandage on the area, as this can make it hurt even more. Tony tried to put my mind at rest by explaining that this was quite a common bite, that the hospital would have an antivenom, and that everything would be okay. But I was beginning to panic. We were flying back to the UK the next day, and I really didn't know what to do.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So what did you do?
Well, Tony phoned the doctor, who told him to check my symptoms for the next hour or two. As time went on, the pain became very intense, from my foot right up to my knee. My husband was on the internet and was reading out the possible symptoms. I wasn't feeling sick, and I hadn't yet developed a fever, but I had a terrible headache, and my foot was beginning to swell up. At this point, Tony decided to take me to the local hospital to be on the safe side. I really didn't want to go, as I had visions of being kept in for days and all our plans being spoilt. But Tony and my husband insisted. When we got to the hospital, I was relieved to see how casual everyone was when Tony explained I'd been bitten by a red-back spider. They told me to take a seat and got on with their work.
And did you receive any treatment?
By the time I got to see a doctor, the pain was very intense indeed, and I was getting quite upset. The doctor decided to give me a dose of an antivenom, which he assured me would eventually deal with the problem. Unfortunately, he also explained that it wouldn't have an immediate effect and the symptoms might last for several days. But the story has a happy ending. My husband managed to book us onto another plane 1 week later. And even better news was that the symptoms of the bite finally cleared up after about 24 hours. Within a couple of days, I was back to normal again. So thanks to the spider, we managed to extend our holiday by a week.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
You will hear two students talking about a class assignment about wild bird rescue and rehabilitation. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. As you listen to the first part of the conversation, answer questions 21 to 25.
Okay, let's go over the requirements and see what we have left to do.
Let's see. We have to give the professor a written summary of the information we've gathered on our topic, wild bird rescue and rehabilitation.
The other written thing we have to turn in is a case study of the rehabilitation of one bird. We have the information on that already.
Right. All we have to do is write it up. What about charts and graphs? Do we need to include something like that?
I don't think so. They aren't really relevant, but we do have to turn in a list of the resources we used.
Naturally. What about videos? I heard some of the other students were doing that.
Well, I guess that must be optional, because I don't see it on the requirements list. Okay, we should start planning our class presentation, since that counts for half the grade.
We've looked at lots of sources of information, but I think our best source was the interviews we did with the wildlife rehabilitators.
Agreed. That and the journal articles. I think we have enough information from those two sources for the presentation anyhow. The books we looked at weren't all that helpful.
I wonder if we should try to bring in some live birds for the presentation.
That would be too difficult, don't you think? But we have lots of photos of rehabilitated birds. We can show those.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Right. OK, I think we should start by talking about how to rescue a bird. Probably first we should help people understand which birds need rescuing.
Yeah, that's really important. Because a lot of times people see a baby bird that's all alone, or they find a bird sitting on the ground and they think it needs to be rescued.
And usually those are just baby birds learning to fly. So we should emphasize that people should only attempt to rescue a bird that's clearly injured.
For certain kinds of birds, the rescuer needs to wear protective gloves because some of those birds have sharp claws and can tear your shirt, or worse, injure your face or some other part of your body.
Yes, that's an important point. OK, next, let's tell people to put the injured bird in a box with good air circulation. We should let them know that a cage isn't necessary, and a bag, especially a plastic one, could hurt the bird more.
Another thing we need to say is that the best way to help the bird stay calm is not by petting it or talking to it, but by leaving it completely alone. Then people should take the bird to the bird rescue center as soon as possible.
Right. And we should also point out that when they're driving the bird to the rescue center, it's better not to play music on the radio or talk loudly, because those things just stress the bird.
Yes, it's better just to speak quietly while you have the bird in the car. Okay, we've got that part covered. Next we should talk about what happens at the rescue center.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture on cities of the future. You now have 30 seconds to read questions 31 to 37.
Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 37.
Okay, we've been looking at how societies will develop in the future and at the increase in the size of cities. So I want to talk to you today about the key considerations in these cities of the future. There are 3 key elements I want to look at, and these are the new features they will have, issues of size, and the main problems to be considered. First of all, individual transportation will be a big factor in these new megacities as public transport becomes unmanageable. There'll be a huge rise in the use of segways, which are personal transporters like motorized scooters. As a result, and partly also to reduce pollution, roads will be altered so that they are narrower and will take up less of a city's space than they do currently. Naturally, this is a major change to the infrastructure, and something that may hinder it is the huge amount of investment it will require. The next thing is, what is going to happen to the commercial areas? We do not want these to become even larger concrete jungles than they are at present, so we have to look at design. And current designs for city development include building gardens on the roofs of these buildings to make a more pleasant environment for workers. And you may think that these areas will expand to cope with increased commercial activity. In fact, the prediction is that they will cover 1/5 of the area that they do at present as we build upwards. The exception to this is shopping centres, which we predict will expand with more and more temperature-controlled malls. What may cause difficulties is that the superstores will be confined to the outer edges of the city, as they will be too big to fit into the new malls. Then, of course, there are the residential areas, and these will undergo their own changes. One particular development will be houses which are built from glass, as innovations in this material allow it to provide light without causing problems with temperature inside a building. The residential areas will not be allowed to expand without limit, as happens in some areas at present, and their size will be restricted to a population of 15,000. One issue, which has yet to be resolved, and I'm not sure it ever will be, is how we manage to house older residents. They will be increasing in numbers as time goes on. Finally, how will these cities live? We know we have limited energy sources, so what will we do? Well, something currently in development, which will be a feature, is that waste is going to become an energy source. For example, to provide gas in homes. Also, as new technology and systems are developed, we will find that energy plants will become smaller. Another energy source we could use, but one which raises issues of having enough space and too much noise, is wind farms. Because of the problems, I'm not convinced these will be the grand solution to our energy problems that we thought they were going to be.
Now you have some time to look at questions 38 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 38 to 40.
Now, moving on to looking at the social aspect of cities, we need to look at housing and how people will live. Cities currently have flats in the centre, populated by single people and wealthier residents, and families tend to move to the outskirts. In the future, the centre of cities will see a dramatic change. We will see many more examples of cooperative buildings. This is where people join together to form a company that owns the building they live in. And despite continuing shortages, there will also be a rise in the provision of retirement homes in city centres, so that the elderly can have easy access to hospitals and shops. Recently, we have seen a levelling off in the growth of private housing, and I think that will not change. But we are likely to see more social housing, as far fewer people will be able to afford to own their own homes. Okay, now, if anybody has any...
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Give it to me.